Yes. So, hello students. I hope all of you are doing good, right? I'm also doing good. Thank you so much. So, as you know, we'll be taking up the topic offer and acceptance today, right? I have shown you the outline yesterday. Yes, but before that, we'll be doing a quick recap of what we have discussed in our previous session. Plus, maybe whatever doubts you have posted, whatever doubts you have messaged, I'll try to answer those doubts as well in my recap session itself. Right. So, if you remember, we have talked about kinds of contracts wherein we said on the basis of enforceability or legal validity, we have got valid contract, then void contract, right? Like that. So, if you can recall, right? If you can recall, what is valid contract? Contract which is enforceable in the court of law. Contract which is enforceable. That means the essential elements of a valid contract has been satisfied. The court of law can compel the parties to perform. Correct. Then coming to the next one after the void contract, after the valid contract, what we have discussed is void contract. Void contract means which is not enforceable or ceases to be enforceable. And now what do I mean by not enforceable? Obviously it means that you cannot go to court of law, or even if you go to court of law cannot compel the parties to perform. Correct. So basically they have not satisfied section number 10 requirements, okay, or requirements of section number 10. Then in this category itself, we have even another one which is voidable contract. What is voidable contract? Where there is an option given, option available with whom the aggrieved party, the party who has suffered, right? What do you mean by aggrieved party? The party who has suffered will get an option to make the contract valid or void. If the party wants to continue with the contract, that means they want to make it valid, then they can continue with it. But just in case they decide that they don't want to continue with it, they want to make it void, that is also possible. So it's with the aggrieved party that they have got the option to decide. Now we said, when will it happen that the contract will become voidable? There can be many circumstances, out of which one circumstance I have picked, right? If you remember, we said if the consent is not obtained freely, like if the consent is obtained by way of coercion, by applying coercion, okay, acceptance is taken from the offeree, from the other party, okay, by way of coercion, then the contract becomes what? Voidable. Correct. So some of you have asked me this doubt. I explained this earlier. Now I think at least it might be clear if you have not understood earlier, right? Then coming to illegal agreements. Illegal agreements is nothing but where the object itself is illegal, unlawful, right? So maybe you will say the essential elements of a valid contract is satisfied. No, it can't be, because when we say illegal, obviously it is expressly declared to be void. So these illegal agreements are always void ab initio. That means void from the very beginning. Then we have unenforceable contract, and I hope you remember unenforceable contract means again not enforceable, but then due to which reason it is not enforceable, right? It is not because of the non-compliance of section 10, but it is because of the other special requirements. If there is some special requirement, like the contract has to be in writing, the contract has to be on a stamp paper, or the contract needs to be registered, something like that. If there is some special requirement which is not fulfilled, then we will say that is unenforceable contract. If section 10, I'm repeating again, if section 10 conditions not satisfied, then we will call it as void contract, okay, which has the same effect, that is not enforceable only. But then if some other requirement is not satisfied, okay, then we will call that as, we call that as unenforceable contract, okay. Then apart from the legal validity or enforceability, we said another basis can be formation or mode of creation of contract, right? Formation or mode of creation of contract, wherein we said there can be express contract, there can be implied contract. So talking about express contract, right, it is nothing but expressed in words, okay, maybe written or maybe oral. So it can be oral, it can be written. So some of you have asked this doubt that, sir, why will a person do an oral contract? See, we never said that you have to do the contract orally. We are just saying that this is also a type of contract which is possible. Okay, sometimes contract may be written, sometimes contract may be oral. Of course, the drawback of oral contract would be that it would be difficult for you to prove later, right? Proving will be difficult. So we don't advise oral contract, but just we're saying that when we talk about express contract, there is a possibility of written or oral both. Okay, this is covered where section number 9. Then we have got implied contract. Implied contract means which comes into place because of the conduct. That means the act or omission. Correct? Act or omission. So maybe sometimes when we walk in a self-service restaurant and have a cup of tea, then it is implied. Right, it is implied that now you'll have to pay for that particular cup of tea. So there comes what? A contract. So it's implied. Or maybe if I give you one more example, let us say there is a bus. Okay, there is a bus, RTC bus only, you can say, the RTC bus which is plying, which is on a particular road, okay, which is plying on a particular road or particular street. It indicates what? It indicates that those who want to step in can step in, those who want to travel, those who want to get into that particular bus can get in. So once you get into that bus, right, you have implied that you want to enter into a contract. So there again, there is no word of mouth actually, written or oral way, but then it is just implied, right? Okay. And then this conduct can be act or omission as well. Okay, act or omission as well. If you remember, I've given you some example with respect to omission also yesterday. Like I said, if I say that Naman, you please buy my car in case Harshal doesn't buy. So if Harshal is not buying, right, that is implied now that me and Naman may have a contract in place. So implied means because of the conduct, okay, act or omission, anything. Then if you remember, I have talked about quasi contract multiple times. I have told now what is quasi contract, and I have told you about quasi judicial body as well. So whenever the word quasi comes, we said it is nothing but imposed by law. So quasi contract means contract imposed by law. The parties did not had any intention to enter into a contract. They did not even enter into a contract. It is just that the law has imposed certain obligation. So example I have given about maybe some goods are being lost, or maybe I said I forgot my laptop, and then maybe Akanksha finds that laptops and gets it. So then it becomes my duty to pay the charges, and I have the right to collect the laptop. Same way, Akanksha will have the duty to return the laptop to me and collect the charges will be her right. So this way there is some rights and duties on the part of both the parties, but that is not because they have intended to do that. It is because of law which comes into place. So that's quasi contract which is not being done by parties, but it just happens. Correct? And I've told you this quasi contracts is the word which is not being used by law. Law doesn't use this word quasi. Okay, the Bail Act doesn't use this. It is the courts which uses, it is the public which uses this term quasi, right? So, one more thing I have told you, this quasi contracts is a detailed topic which we'll be discussing later, right? I have shown you what are the topics which we have in our Indian Contract Act, right? The 10 topics which we have grouped, okay? First one was nature and kinds, first one is nature and kinds of contract. And then after that, you know that we are discussing basically essential elements of valid contract only in detail. Isn't it? After discussing nature and kinds of contract, what is that we are going to discuss? Now, you know, we are going to start offer and acceptance, which is nothing but an essential element of a valid contract. Then we are going to discuss consideration, capacity to contract, free consent, legality of object and consideration, right? Agreements which are expressly declared to be void. So that means basically we are going to talk about all those essential elements given under section 10 in detail. Okay. So in that, I have also told you one of the topic is quasi contract which we are going to discuss. So in detail we'll discuss there, but brief idea I have already given. Okay guys, so pay attention, please. So then tacit contract, we said tacit contract means the contract which comes by some action or customary mode. So I've given you example, auction sale. In case of auction sale, if you remember, I said striking of that hammer on the table. Only when that happens, striking of hammer on the table, then we say yes, the sale takes place, right? The contract comes into existence. Or maybe they say 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, right? 1, 2, 3, going, gone, right? Like that they may use some customary mode. That is where the contract will come into place, otherwise not. So that is called a tacit contract. Then this is all what? On the basis of formation or maybe mode of creation. Then e-commerce contracts, the name itself is enough. Electronic way when the contract is done, right? Maybe the internet is being used. E-commerce contracts, right, is nothing but about electronic data interchange. So those contracts are called as e-commerce contracts, right? Then this was the second basis. First one was what? Enforceability or the legal validity, correct? And then second one was mode of creation or formation. The third one is on the basis of formation, right? On the basis of formation. So I have told you here, see, when we are discussing about performance, okay, when we are discussing about the basis performance, then we will have to use two things here. One is at the time of formation of contract. At the time of formation of contract, and second one is about what? After formation of the contract. See, when we are talking about at the time of formation of contract, which terminologies are used, or which type of contracts we use? Unilateral and bilateral. But when we are talking about after formation of the contract, then what is used? It is executory and executed contracts, right? It is executory and executed. So before getting into this again, I will just recall that example which I have given you yesterday. I said Akanksha madam has lost her Tommy Choo Choo, right? And I have taken 4 scenarios here. Just recall one by one. Akanksha madam has lost her Tommy Choo Choo. And then what happened? Amit, her friend, could find that Tommy Choo Choo. So gets it to Akanksha, right? Gets it to Akanksha. That means Amit has already done something. And now Akanksha madam is so happy that she says, I will pay you ₹1,000 for this. I will pay you what? ₹1,000 for this. So she's not paying 1,000, but she's saying, I will pay. So that means here there is a contract taking place. Till now there was no contract. But now there is a contract taking place. And when we talk about at that moment, when the contract is taking place, what is happening is one party has already performed and the other party is yet to perform. So those parties, okay, that party which is yet to perform is doing nothing but promise. So if you understand, Amit has performed. Amit has already got the dog, not dog, Tommy Choo Choo. And Akanksha has said that I will pay ₹1,000. That means she's doing what? A promise. So if you understand, when are we talking about this? At the time of formation of contract, because that time the contract is getting formed when Akanksha says I will pay ₹1,000. Okay, so at that moment we will call it as unilateral contract. Okay, we'll use which term? Unilateral. Okay, then question comes that what is bilateral contract? So I said with the same example, if I make some change wherein Akanksha lost her Tommy Choo Choo, Amit is the friend of Akanksha. So what Akanksha does is she informs Amit. She calls up Amit and says, Arey, I have lost my Tommy Choo Choo and I am deeply hurt. So please, if you find that Tommy Choo Choo for me, please get it. I will pay you ₹1,000. Okay, this is what she said. And Amit said, wow, I'm getting an opportunity to earn ₹1,000. And anyways, I know Tommy Choo Choo, right? So I can find a Tommy Choo Choo and get it so that I can get what? 1,000. So now when this is happening, right? When Akanksha proposed this, Amit also said, yes, I will trace out that Tommy Choo Choo. That means the contract is getting formed. So at that moment, that means at the time of formation of contract, at that moment, that's nothing but at the time of formation of contract, what is happening is Akanksha has promised that she'll give 1,000. Amit has promised that, yes, I will trace I'll trace Tommy Choo Choo for you. So this is where both the parties are promising. No one has performed. At the time of formation, again understand, at the time of formation of contract means what? When the contract is being done, that time we'll use the term bilateral contract, because here both the parties have promised each other. They have not performed. None of them have performed. If one would have performed and another would have promised, then we would have used the word unilateral contract. Alright, then the other names also we have discussed. When it comes to unilateral, we said it is contract with executed consideration, because already one party has performed. Whereas bilateral means contract with executory consideration, because the parties have not performed. None of the parties have performed. So that's where it is contract with executory consideration. These are other names of unilateral and bilateral. Okay, then coming to executed or executory contract. These terms, please understand, this terminology we use only after formation of the contract. Okay, which means what? Now same example, Akanksha and Amit. Akanksha lost her Tommy Choo Choo. So she called up Amit that please find that Tommy Choo Choo I'll pay you rupees 1000. Amit said, okay, I will find out, and if I find, you please give me 1000 rupees. Okay, let's say this happened on 1st of May 2000, as I've written also here. See, okay, 1st of May 2000, this happened. Now what happens? Let us say on 3rd of May, Amit gets that Tommy Choo Choo to Akanksha, and Akanksha also pays that 1000 rupees. That means both are performing. Okay, so it will be called as executed contract. Performance plus performance is nothing but executed contract. See, please understand, when did the contract come into place? On 1st of May 2000, when Akanksha lost her Tommy Choo Choo, she called up Amit. Okay, so that is at the time of formation of contract. Okay, on 1st of May, when this is happening, that is called as at the time of formation. Okay, now after that, whatever is there will be called as after formation of the contract. So when I pick that example, or pick this example, then I said 3rd of May this fellow comes with Tommy Choo Choo. So 3rd of May will be obviously after 1st of May. That means after formation of the contract. This will be called as what? Executed contract, because both the parties have performed their part on 3rd of May. Okay, now you might say, sir, 2nd of May, what will be the position? On 2nd of May, if you have to call this contract as, executed or executory, what will we pick? Obviously, on 2nd of May, we will say 2nd of May is after formation, right? 1st of May was at the time of formation. 2nd of May will become what? After formation of the contract. So, and 2nd of May, none of the parties have performed, right? So, it will be called as executory contract. Okay, are you getting it, guys? So in this example only, if I talk about, in this example only, if I talk about 2nd of May 2020, then what will happen is it will become executory contract. But 3rd of May, it is nothing but executed contract, because both the parties have performed. Okay, then coming to executory. Now you might have understood, but again am I explaining. Okay, the same example. 1st of May she lost. 2nd of May, none of them have performed. So if you understand 2nd of May, it will be called as what? Executory contract, right? 3rd of May, Tommy Choo Choo was brought in by Amit. Okay, Amit brought that Tommy Choo Choo on 3rd of May, but Akanksha did not pay. So 3rd of May, again it will be called as executory. See, it will be called as executed only when both the parties have performed their respective obligation. Okay, even if one of the parties have not performed, then it will be called as executory contract. Okay, so on 3rd of May, it is again executory contract. But on 4th of May, when Madam Akanksha pays that 1000 rupees to Amit, it can be called as executed contract. Right? It will be called as executed contract. But on 2nd of May, on 3rd of May, or 1st of May, let's say 1 o'clock this happened. She lost and she called up. Okay. So that is at 1 o'clock, it is at the time of formation. But after 1 o'clock, okay, let's say after 1 o'clock, meaning let's say 1:15, the status is what? Executory. Only the words unilateral and bilateral will be used when we are talking about at the time of formation of contract, means when the parties are entering into the contract at that moment. Okay, it is unilateral or bilateral. But after that will be all nothing but after formation of the contract, where we'll be using the term executed contract and executory contract. Okay. Now here there may be a question, okay, there may be a question which you can ask. And what can be that question? Maybe you can say, sir, at the time of entering into the contract itself, okay, at the time of entering into the contract itself, if at the time of entering into the contract itself, let's say both the parties have performed, okay, both the parties have performed. This also is possible. How is it possible? Let's say I go to a mobile shop, I pay money and the person gives me mobile. So now that moment itself the contract is taking place, and at the time of entering into the contract itself, I am paying that money. Okay, let's say rupees 10,000 is what I have to pay, and I'm paying that, and that person is giving me that mobile worth rupees 10,000. So now you will say, sir, at the time of formation of contract itself, what is happening is both the parties have performed. So what should we call this contract as? Because if you just have a look at the time of formation of contract, we said maybe there can be performance promise or there can be promise. If it is performance and promise, then it is unilateral. When it is promise, then it is bilateral. But we never discussed at the time of formation of contract, when there is performance, then what do we call it as? However, if you just understand here, that is after formation of contract, if you just have a look at it, you will say, sir, performance is called as executed contract. So please understand, my dear friends, in this situation also, we will use the term executed contract. You'll say, sir, but it is at the time of formation of contract. Agreed. But then there is no concept of performance plus performance. Okay, there's no name, not concept I'll say, but there's no name given. So we'll use the same name, that is executed contract. Understand, guys? So in unilateral contract, one party has performed its part. Okay, one party has performed its part and other party is yet to perform, right? At the time of formation, one party has performed, other party is yet to perform. Yet to perform means it becomes promise, will be called as unilateral. When you say both the parties are yet to perform, then it is called as bilateral contract. Okay. Whereas when I talk about after formation of contract, when you say both the parties have performed their part, then it is executed contract. Whereas if you say after formation of contract, both the parties have not performed, that means promise. Or if you say, no sir, one party has performed, other one has not performed. Okay, so performance plus promise is called as what? Executory contract. Okay, and then this one was our question. Okay, this one was our question, that when we are talking about at the time of formation of contract, both the parties have performed, then what should we call it as? So we said, then we'll call it as simply executed contract. Okay. Now, just to give you a very chindi example here from our day-to-day life, let's say boy and a girl. Okay, a boy and a girl decided to get married. So do you think when they decided to get married, immediately we'll call them as husband and wife? No. At that moment, maybe you will say fiancé if engagement has taken place or they have committed themselves, right? And slowly, or maybe later on, when the marriage takes place, after the marriage, they'll be called as what? Husband and wife. So please understand, initially we use some other term and later on, that is after marriage, we use some other term. It's quite possible, right? Or it happens, no? Same way here. At the time of formation of contract, which terminology will use? Unilateral, bilateral. After formation of the contract, which terms will use? Yeah, executory and executed contract. But you may say, no sir, they saw today. Okay, a boy and a girl met today itself and today itself they got married. Then obviously, as we said, okay, here in this example, I was saying that it will be nothing but executed contract. Same way, there will be using the term husband and wife. Right, same day they saw each other, same day they got married, so there is no question of calling fiancé and fiancée, but rather will directly or straight away call them as husband and wife. So if I talk about this scenario which I just raised, this question which I raised, at the time of formation, if both the parties have performed, then we said what will be called as executed contract. Okay guys, I hope now it is clear to you. Still not clear, then please read from the book once. Okay, read from the book once, and then if you have any query, you can always post that query to me. Okay, then as per English law, if you remember, as per English law, we said they classify the contracts into formal and simple. Okay, formal contracts again are of two types: contract under seal or off seal. Okay, and then other one is contract of record. Under seal means which is written, signed and sealed, whereas contract of record means nothing but the court order. Okay, the court order, because of the court judgment, maybe the contract comes into place. Simple contract means nothing but written or oral. And if you remember, I have told you that English law, whenever we are discussing something from English law, we are trying to compare Indian law with English law. That's only for the sake of, okay, your knowledge, general knowledge. Okay, it's not that you need to memorize this. It's not that you need to by heart this, right? Then, if you recall, yesterday I have told you that there can be different types of questions asked in the examination. It's a subjective type paper. So basically the questions will be theoretical, which will be descriptive questions. Okay, theoretical meaning nothing but descriptive, or maybe distinguishing questions, or maybe some practical questions. Practical questions in the sense where you will have to apply the provision. Okay, where you'll have to apply the provision which you have understood in a given situation. And then maybe there is a possibility, we don't know, maybe there is a possibility of what they asking MCQs or true or false with reason, or maybe fill in the blanks. Okay, very less chance, but yes, we cannot rule out. Okay, then I've told you that when they are talking about theoretical question like descriptive and distinguishing, then basically they are checking your understanding of the concept and whether you're able to remember things or not. But when they're asking practical question, the main idea is to check whether you're able to apply the provision which you have understood, right? Apply the provision which you have understood or not. So that's where practical questions. And then MCQs, true or false, fill in the blanks, again is based on the, what do you say, understanding concept only. Whether you remember the concept or not is what they'll check, right? Then I have told you, when you're writing theoretical questions, you should be writing point wise, right? When it comes to distinguishing questions, also point wise, but then maybe in a table form you should present it, right? And when it comes to practical, when it comes to MCQs, true or false, obviously as per the requirement you will write. But when it comes to practical question, I have told you, you have to be very careful when it comes to practical question. You have to present it well, and you should cover these elements, right? 5 elements which I have told you in your answer. Number 1, applicable law, meaning whatever provision, whatever law you are referring or you are keeping as a benchmark, that you need to write first. Secondly, you should write the facts of that particular case. Okay, that particular case which is given it to you in the question, you should write summary of the facts. Don't write as it is the facts and waste your time. Just pick up the important points, okay, from the case and write. Okay, so facts of the case. Then what ultimately is the question involved, because sometimes we get lost or we don't understand what exactly they're asking. So it's better that you try to understand what exactly they're asking. So that is nothing but question involved. Okay, so you'll write that as question involved is. Then about your explanation, your reasoning, that's another element I said. Your reasoning, your analysis you can write, and then give conclusion. Don't be in a hurry to give conclusion. Okay, first conclusion should come at the end. Then I have told you, if you remember, that when we are talking about this conclusion, first you will give the general answer, that means whatever they have asked. But if there is an exception also to it, then you will quote the exception to the answer. And sometimes there is a possibility that they might ask alternative question, meaning they may say that if things get changed or if fact get changed, will your answer also get changed? So you need to write that alternate answer also at the end. Acha. In your explanation, I have told you that you should not forget assumptions, right? If you remember, I have told you, in case some assumption is required, because if facts are not complete, then you will have to take certain assumptions, right, and then answer. So the assumption should be included in your explanation only, correct? Right. Then some points I have told you yesterday, which I have listed out now in a separate file. Okay, so if you just have a look at it, maybe few things I have told you yesterday, few more things I thought of and I have written in one file so that it will be useful for you. Okay, so please pay attention. So before I start off with our topic, offer and acceptance, I just thought I'll complete this part, tips for presentation, so that when you're writing any answer to a practical question, at least you will take care of these things. And not just practical but also theoretical questions when you're writing, at least these things will help you. So my idea was to help you with this. Okay, so I have prepared that and now taking up that. So anything which we have discussed yesterday, I'll not elaborate. Anything new, I will just elaborate or I'll just explain it to you. Okay guys? Yes. So first thing which I suggest is, don't bother about side headings. Please don't bother about side headings, because if you're writing side headings, you're wasting your time. You'll say, no sir, in our 11th or 12th or maybe our 10th, they have been saying that please write side headings, please write side headings, right? So maybe we are used to that. Yeah, okay, fine, it's good. I'm also in favor of side heading, but what happens is the time which is at your disposal in the examination will be less. So you will have to decide, you will have to choose priority, or you will have to prioritize things. So that is where I'm saying, if you can avoid side heading, you can save some time. The word which you are writing in side heading, will be used in the sentence. So what you should do, what I will suggest is that word which you want to write as side heading should be written in capital letters in the sentence. So this can be an alternative. So instead of writing side heading, that particular word which you are going to use or which you might have used in side heading should be written in the sentence, obviously will be written. So what you will do is should be written in capital letters. That way you can just highlight that point or highlight that word, that will act as a side heading. So this is an alternative of side headings. Okay guys, next I have told you yesterday, please answer point wise. Please answer point wise. So point wise means what? You should be writing 1, 2, 3. No, I didn't say that. If you remember, I have told you, please use the simple bullet points. Okay, dot. Don't even use this asterisk and other things, right? Don't show your drawing or painting skills here, right? Because you will be wasting a lot of time then. Then I have told you the points which you are writing should be of decent number of lines, right? If you are getting into paragraphs again, I would suggest not to go for paragraphs, but still if you're going for like 4 or 5 lines is like decent enough, after which you should switch to next one, right? Alignment I have told you, like margins and all, you should take care properly, right? Then please understand, you might be knowing this, but still I am saying no strike offs. Okay, like this, see example, if you just observe here, this is not right, boss. Please don't do that. See, these overwritings, please avoid. Okay, no overwritings, no strikes off and all. But you'll say, sir, by mistake it happened. Like, see this example where I have talked about COMPANIE, right? The spelling of company is wrong. So what I have done? Strike through. Okay, just one line I have drawn. Instead of doing overwriting, I have just put one line on it and then again written company. This is the way you can write. So it doesn't look clumsy. Okay, if it looks clumsy, obviously you will not be able to impress the valuer. So avoid these type of overwritings and all. Okay, that's the next thing. Then next one. I hope you are noting down things, right? Please take care of this, and not just note down, but rather when you practice, right? When you practice the practical questions or any question, okay, please take care that you start applying this. When you apply, obviously you will not forget. When you practice this, you will not forget it. Okay. In the examination, unconscious mind should take care of these things, right? It should not be like consciously it should come. Unconsciously you should take care. Okay, if I have done a mistake, if I have done some spelling error, I will not do overwriting. It should be like unconscious way. It should just be a line and then write that again, right? No side headings. It should be like unconsciously happening. Okay, point wise it should come. Like yesterday when I wrote the answer, if you remember, I have written point wise only. Okay, then I will suggest go for only one pen, and institute normally says, okay, black ball point pen. Okay, ball point pen. If you say gel pen and all, you may use gel pen, there's no problem, but then that gel pen should be of a quality wherein if some liquid falls, like some tea, water falls, okay, then it should not get spread. The script should not get spread. That's the basic idea. So that's why they say ballpoint pen, but in case you have that gel pen that which will also not spread upon the falling of liquid, then it's okay, you may use that. Okay, then 4 papers you have got. Let's say those 2 are what, your MCQ based. So if I talk about 2 papers, I'll say for those 2 papers use 2 different pens, because normally what happens is the color of the ink gets changed, right? It becomes slightly darker, and maybe you'll have those problem with the blotting of ink. So if possible, 1 pen each paper. I'm not saying that after using the pen in the accounts examination, it should be thrown. You can use it later on, but for the paper number 2, again use a new pen. And again, after the paper, you can use that for your own, at your home or maybe in your classes. But examination purpose, I'm suggesting this. Yes, guys. So what I was suggesting is that use 1 pen each paper. Okay. Then next thing which I have written here, if you just observe, is same as used in class. Meaning what? Meaning here that if you are using a particular brand, you are using a particular model of pen in the classes, then you get used to it. So don't try too much in the examination. Rather, use the same pen in the examination also. Otherwise, it becomes difficult in the examination to try with new things. So no experimentation in examination. Okay, this also you can keep in mind. Acha, if you are not able to write simultaneously, don't worry, I will send this file to you. Okay, I'll PDF this file and send it to you. So don't bother so much, but try to listen to me so that I can quickly cover this. Okay, or I can quickly complete it. Then what I'm saying is personalize the answer. See, yesterday when we were writing the answer, Mr. M died in an accident. So if possible, in the analysis which you do, in the explanation which you give, use those particular names which are given in the case. Okay, and then try to conclude. That is going to be always better, so that it doesn't look like you're answering generally, but you're answering to that specific case. So that's why I'm saying personalize the answer. That means use the name of the parties in your explanation or analysis. Okay. Next, no multiple color of pens. Okay. In the class notes, probably you're using multiple colors. I am also using, but in the examination, it is not allowed. Only single color. Okay. Maybe pencil you can use, but then not multiple color of pens. Then I hope you are aware of this. If you are not aware, then remember, no underlining is allowed in the examination. Same way, no circling is allowed. Now don't argue here or don't ask me questions on this, please. These are the instructions given by ICAI which all of us are supposed to follow. Whether it sounds logical, not sounds logical, it's all a different thing. But then please understand, this is what ICAI says. Why is circling not allowed? Simple reason, because normally a person correct the papers will do the circling. Similar way, if you want to understand the logic behind no underlining, the person correcting the paper might have the habit of underlining. That's where they say no. But you think it is illogical, still you'll have to follow. Okay. Then coming to language, I've already told you, if you want to have a sophisticated language, okay, in the basic classes I've told you, if you want to have a sophisticated language, then you'll have to use simple English, which is grammatically correct and should be using maximum legal terms and euphemisms. What is euphemisms? What is euphemisms? Yes, euphemisms means using less harsh words. That means nothing but using polite words is euphemisms. I gave you an example. Instead of saying bribe, you may use the word gift, right? Normally it happens. So that way, you have to select words carefully in the examination as well, okay, while writing the answer. Then this I have told you yesterday, bullet points should be inside the margin. Only question numbers should be outside the margin, right? Then in the examination, write each answer on fresh page. Okay, write each answer on fresh page. So if you have first question wherein you have 4 bits, then 1A should be on first page, 1B maybe on the second page, 1C on the third page. If you say no sir, our 1A is of answer is of 2 pages, then okay, start the 1B question on third page. So see to it that any new answer which you're writing should be on fresh page. No sir, in 5th question, A bit covers 4 sub-bits because they're true or false. Then it is okay, boss. But otherwise, make sure that you're answering, okay, on fresh page. Each answer on fresh page is what ICAI says again. Then please understand, diagrams, flowcharts, we might use in the classroom again, but should not be used in the examination unless they specifically said, please explain this with the help of a flowchart. Please explain this with the help of a diagram. Then you're supposed to write. Otherwise, you should avoid this. Then I have told you, I guess earlier only, that you will be provided with a single rule paper in the examination, not plain paper. So start using single rule books only. Okay, whether it is accounts, whether it is business laws, BCR, anything, please start using single ruled books so that you get that practice, okay, practice which will help you in the examination also. Then if possible, this is again my suggestion, if possible, don't use complete cursive handwriting, okay, because everyone may not be able to understand complete cursive handwriting. Now, what do I mean by complete cursive? Because you'll say, sir, you're also using cursive handwriting. Yeah, I am using, but my handwriting is not completely cursive. Like if you observe, normally what happens is, when I'm talking about completely cursive, people will write P as this, K as this, correct, I as this. So if possible, please avoid all this. This complete cursive handwriting may not be understandable to everyone. So make sure that the person who's correcting your paper should be like, comfortable, should feel that yes, you have not, wasted his time or you're not troubling him much. Okay, if you make his life easy, then he will make your life easy. So this is again my suggestion. To follow or not is your wish. India is a democratic country. Okay, my job was to give suggestion. I have given it because few people argue with me, so I'll not take up that. Any query you post relating to this, I'm not going to answer at all. Okay, then no short forms, I've told you yesterday itself. But then I've told you, if you remember some example I gave you, like I said, if I talk about company, CO dot, okay, company, it's a universal short form which everyone uses. LTD, limited, everyone uses. So you may also use. So something which is universal, okay, fine, you may use. Or suppose you have defined something and then using it. Suppose you have defined something and using it. Sir, meaning, let us say you're writing what? Misrepresentation in some answer, and you know that in the same answer misrepresentation is going to come 4 times. Then you may say, I will write this misrepresentation as MR. So you have defined it, and later on 3 more times when you are writing in the same answer, I'm not talking about different answer, if you're writing this word again in the same answer, then you may use the short form, that is MR. So this is what is defining. Okay, so universal, defining, or another one is used by ICAI. Sorry, another one is what? Which is used by ICAI. So if ICAI is using some short form, you may also use. Okay, so these 3 exceptions exist. Otherwise, short forms should not be used in the examination. Okay, and I have told you, your SMS language also you should avoid. And you write N, you write D, like those SMS language should be completely avoided in the examination. Then this question is also being asked by many students, that sir, is it that we have to write the answers in the same sequence, okay, of the questions? And the answer is no, it's not like that. But see, meaning what? See, 1 to 6 questions you will have in business laws. I have told you in our initial classes itself. First question will be mandatory. Out of the remaining 5 questions, any 4 you have to write. So like that, completely you have to write 5 questions out of 6 for business laws paper. I'm talking about 2A. I'm not talking about BCR. I'm just talking about business laws paper. So if I say that if you want to write first, let's say question number 3, answer to question number 3, you can write. It's not that you have to write first question 1 and then only write question 2. Nothing of that sort. But if you have started with question 3 and let's say question 3 has got 3 bits, you should complete all those 3 bits at one place itself. And after that, you can move on to other question. So let's say you have completed all the 3 bits of question 3 and then later on you want to go to question number 5 wherein 4 bits are there. Then write all those 4 bits, okay, answer to all those 4 bits. And once you complete that question 5 completely and you say, now I want to write question 1, no problem, you can write question 1. But again, if there are 4 bits in question 1, complete that at one place and then move on to the next one. This is what we expect. Okay, you should not write first 1A, then second A, then third B, then 4C, and then coming to again 1B. No, this is not right. If you start a particular question, complete all the bits and then move on to the next question is what ICAI says. So please follow this particular instruction very clearly. Okay, sequence of questions. Don't try to miss on this. Okay. Then one more thing I'll say is time management, which is very important. So whenever you're writing answer, just observe how much time you're taking, because normally what would happen is if 6 questions you have to write, okay, for 60 marks, you'll be supposed to write what? No, not 6, sorry. 6 will be given and 5 you'll have to write. And if I say 5 questions are there out and 3 bits are there in each, then 15 questions. So you can just calculate how much time you'll get. 3 hours is the time for this paper. BCR plus business laws, both together. Business laws I've told you is for 60 marks, right, guys? Business laws is for 60 marks. And another thing which you have, okay, this is 2A, paper number 2A, paper number 2B, BCR. BCR is for 40 marks, correct? And business laws is for 60 marks. So, and together how much time you get? 3 hours. Total time 3 hours is what you get. So now what I'm saying is, if let's say 2 hours is for this, okay, 2 hours is for this and 1 hour is for BCR. So in 2 hours, if you will have to write, let's say 15 questions, then you can understand, right? I don't have to tell you exact mathematics here, right? If you are getting 120 minutes for 15 questions, then how much time are you getting, right? If you understand, like 8 minutes odd you will get is what you will have to complete the answer in. So what my point is, keep that thing in mind. Don't forget that. Okay. From the very beginning, whenever you are practicing some question at home also, or the assignments or the slip test which we are going to give you, make sure that you follow this time strictly. Initially, I understand it might be difficult, but if you keep on practicing, it will be definitely possible. Okay, guys. So I'll not repeat this again because this was something self-explanatory, but I thought if I put it at one place, it will be easier for you. So I will share this file with you and you can have a look at it and start following it. Okay. Chalo. So we have completed our recap, and whatever doubts you had asked, I tried covering in my recap only. I've explained that again. That's where the recap was a detailed recap today. And then with respect to the presentation tips also, I have explained in detail few things. Now we will start with our topic number 2 in Indian Contract Act, right? In Indian Contract Act, we have offer and acceptance. So one of the essential elements of a valid contract is what? Offer by one party to the other. And that other should be giving the acceptance to the person who is giving the offer. That is where the contract comes in place. So if there is an offer, we cannot say there will be a contract. Offer plus acceptance only will result in a contract. So in short, we have discussed this, okay, while discussing section 10. Now we are discussing it in detail. So as I have told you yesterday, what are the things which we are going to cover here in this topic? Definition. Right? Definition of what? Offer as well as acceptance. Then some essential elements of a valid offer, same way of valid acceptance also. Then I have told you some important points relating to offer, relating to acceptance also we will see. Correct? We will be discussing that. Then we have something called as kinds of offer. We also have lapse of offer, right? Kinds of offer and lapse of offer. What do you mean by lapse of offer? If you remember, I've told you lapse means revocation, correct? Lapse means what? Revocation. Revocation means what? Withdrawal of offer. So we have to discuss about that as well. So in offer, we'll discuss definition, essential elements, some other important points, then kinds of offer, lapse of offer. In acceptance, we'll be discussing what? Definition, essential elements of a valid acceptance, and then some important points. Apart from this, if you remember, I've told you we'll be discussing even section 3, section 4 and 5, which deals with what? Communication of offer, acceptance and revocation. Right? How to communicate the offer, how to communicate the acceptance, how to communicate the revocation. That is what we need to see. Plus, when will we say that communication is complete? So completion of communication. Completion of communication of what? Offer, acceptance, revocation. Correct. Then we said time limit also is important. Meaning if offerer wants to revoke his offer, before what time he can revoke his offer. That's where time limit for revocation, time limit for withdrawal of offer is also important. So my dear friends, please understand, we will be discussing all this in our topic number 2, which is nothing but, as I have told you, offer and acceptance. Yes. Now, if you remember section number 1, if you just recall, title, extent, commencement date, then 2 clause H is definition of contract, then 2 clause E, right? This is definition of contract. Then 2 clause E is about agreement. 2 clause B gives acceptance as well as I've told you promise, right? Then 2 clause I, voidable contract, right? Voidable. Whereas this one, 2 clause J is void contract. Then section 10 anyways, you know, essential elements of a valid contract. Then section number 9 is express or implied contract, right? Then 2 clause A, I've told you definition of offer, right? Which we'll be reading in this topic. 2 clause B, definition of acceptance, and then the other sections is what we are going to see, section 3, 4, 5, 6 and 8. So let's start without any would you say delay. Now, first thing which we'll be discussing is definition of offer. Okay, what are we going to discuss first? Definition of offer. And the definition of offer is given where? Section 2, clause A. My dear friends, let me tell you again, whenever we read some law, we first try to read the law from the bare act, right? We try to get the points from the bare act, from the act itself, from the act as it is, right? Bare act means what? Act as it is. So from the act itself, we are trying to get it. In case we don't get that, then probably we refer other things, like if you remember rules or corrigendum or maybe the notifications or the case clause, like that. There are multiple things which we refer for reading a law. If you have not watched those videos, I request you to watch the videos. If you have any sort of backlog, if you have not watched any of my previous classes, I request you to watch them, so that now when I am explaining these things, you will understand it better. Otherwise, what happens is you don't understand something and then you ask a query, and then it becomes difficult every time for me to repeat things. Okay, so please, my humble request, watch all the previous videos if you have not attended those classes. Okay, 5 anyways were the live classes, and the 2 classes, recorded classes, which we have given it to you yesterday and day before yesterday. Okay, chalo. Now what are we talking about? We said definition of offer. So definition of offer, what do you mean by offer, is given in section 2, clause A. Of what? Obviously Indian Contract Act 1872, correct? Indian Contract Act 1872. So what does it say? It says maybe when a person signifies, okay, when a person, let's say, signifies his willingness. Signifies means what? He expresses, he indicates his willingness to some other person. Okay, let's say to some other person. Acha. Signifies his willingness for what? Maybe to do something, maybe to do something, or maybe not to do something. Maybe not to do something. So when we say to do something, that is nothing but act. There's nothing but act. To do something positive, right? When we say not to do something, that is nothing but abstinence. There is nothing but what? Abstinence. Okay, abstain, abstaining, abstinence. Okay, these are all one and the same. Only thing is the grammar changes. So when a person, okay, when a person signifies his willingness to do something, okay, he's sharing his willingness to do something or maybe not to do something with other person, and that too with an intention. Okay, with an intention. What sort of intention? To take the assent from the other party. To take the assent from the other party, meaning to take the acceptance from the other party. Sir, acceptance to what? Obviously acceptance to the act or abstinence. Okay, assent is nothing but acceptance. So this assent is for what? The act or maybe for abstinence. So only signifying is not enough, my dear friends. Please understand, signifying itself is not enough. Okay, but also should have an intention. Okay, signifying means indicating or expressing that, okay, I want to do this or I don't want to do this. And he's also having an intention that the other party should give acceptance to that. Okay, acceptance to that act which he said he will do, or to that abstinence which he said he will not do. So he has that intention to take assent also, acceptance also. Understand? No sir, we didn't understand. Okay, I'll give you an example. Let's say example I'm taking. Okay, maybe a person expresses to another person that I would like to sell my car, for rupees 5 lakhs. Okay, for what? Rupees 5 lakhs. He has expressed his willingness to this other person that he wants to sell his car. So that means this is to do something, right? He has expressed his willingness to do something, that is to sell his car for rupees 5 lakhs. And when he is doing this, tell me, can he have an intention that I am giving this offer but that person should not accept? No, it's not right. So please understand that when he is doing this, he is expecting that the other person will give the acceptance to it. He has that intention. This fellow has the intention that the other party will give acceptance to it. Okay, the other party will give acceptance to it. So that intention he has, intention to get the acceptance from the other party. Now, you'll say, sir, acceptance to what? Acceptance to act or acceptance to abstinence? Obviously, the event involved here is selling car, which is nothing but act. It's something positive. It's not for abstinence, right? So, obviously, he is having an intention that the other party will accept his act. That means the other party should say, yes, I am ready to buy the car for rupees 5 lakhs. Understand, guys? So again, I am sharing the definition. Please listen to me carefully. When a person signifies his willingness to another person, and that willingness is for what? To do something, that is nothing but act, or not to do something, which is nothing but abstain from doing, or maybe abstinence. And when he is signifying this, he is having an intention. What sort of intention? Intention to take the assent. Intention to take the assent. Assent means what? Acceptance from the other party. Acceptance for what? Acceptance for the act, or maybe for abstinence, as the case may be. Understand, guys? Now the question comes, sir, what will be this party called as? The person who is giving an offer, what will that party be called as? So please understand, the party will be called as offerer, and the other party will be called as offeree. Okay, not offeree, it's offeree. The person who gives the offer, or the party who gives the offer, is called as offerer, and the other party, that is the party to whom the offer has been given, is called as offeree. Okay, then we may also call this person, okay, as proposer. The person who's giving offer can also be called as what? Proposer. If you uses this term, proposer. But there is no term called as proposee. So don't write that. If you have written, please write that visible strike through. I hope you understand what is visible strike through. See, this is the strike through, and that's visible, meaning the word propose is still visible but striked off. There is one more way of striking off, which is revenge mode. You'll say, sir, what is that revenge mode? See, you'll write proposee and then no need to do this. Okay, please avoid all this. Okay, you can just use visible strike through if you have done a mistake. So proposee is what we are not expecting. We may use the term proposer for the term offerer, but there is no term called as proposee for offeree. Okay, acha. Let us say that the offeree has given the acceptance. The offeree, after receiving the offer, has given the acceptance. Then what will this offerer be called as? Offerer will be called as promiser, because offer when accepted becomes a promise, correct? Okay, offer when accepted becomes a promise. So that's why once the acceptance is done, not when the offer is given, only when the acceptance is given by the offeree, then if you want, you can change the term to what? Promiser. And same way, here we'll change the word to what? Promisee. Okay, the offeree will be called as, or offeree can be called as promisee. We can use these terms. Same as I have told you about, at the time of formation you will be using unilateral, bilateral, and after formation we will be using executory, executed. Same way here. When the offer is given, at that time, please understand, okay, we will be using the term offerer, proposer, okay, and here offeree, offerer or proposer, and the other party is offeree. But once acceptance is given, then it will be called as what? Promiser and promisee. Okay, the parties will be called as promisor and promisee, and I've given you the logic behind that. The logic is very simple. When an offer is accepted, it results in promise as per section 2 clause B, and that's where the parties can be called as promisor and promisee. Okay, great. If you have understood this, now let's move ahead with something more, or let's do one thing. Let's try to see our printed material as well. Okay, so if you just have a look at it, this is topic number 2 in our printed material. Where will you find this printed material? Those who have already got it, very good, and those who have not got it, please understand the link which is provided to you for the video classes contains even the notes, contains even this printed material. So same link you have to use, wherein there is a folder, separate folder for material. Okay, for material, that is nothing but for the book, and you can access the book there. Okay, yeah. Achha, and one more thing, the video classes which are being uploaded is uploaded in the same folder on a daily basis, so the link remains the same. Okay, the link of that Google Drive which is given to you is going to be used throughout our sessions. Okay, so the link will not change on a daily basis, the link will remain the same for classes, and the same link has got even material, that is the book. Okay, yeah. So now talking about definition of offer, as we said, it is given where? Section 2 clause A. Section 2 clause A. So what does it say? An offer consists of the following two parts: expression of one person's willingness, expression of one person's willingness for what? To do or to abstain from doing something, to do or abstain from doing something. When they say abstain, to do, that means it is nothing but act. When they're saying to abstain from something, that means nothing but abstinence, right? Not to do something, that is abstinence. Such expression should be made with a view to take or obtain what? With a view to obtain the assent of the other person to the proposal, act, or abstinence. That is, he is trying to take the acceptance for that act or for the abstinence which he has offered. The person making the offer will be called as what? Offerer, or maybe proposer. And once that offer is accepted, then you know that person will be called as what? Promisor. Where is this written? If you want to know, it is written in section 2 clause C. Section 2 clause C helps us understand who is a promisor and who is a promisee. From there only we have got these terms. Okay, and the person to whom the offer is made is called as offeree. Okay, is called as what? Offeree. And when the offeree gives acceptance, then the offeree will be called as what? Promisee. Offeree will be called as what? Promisee. Again comes from where? Section 2 clause C. Okay, so the two parties, offerer, offeree, later on will be called as promisor and promisee. Later meaning when the acceptance is given. Now example, if you just go through the example, there are two persons, A and B. A sends an offer to B to sell his car for rupees 1,25,000 to B. This is an offer, correct? A is the offerer or proposer, and B, to whom the offer is made, is an offeree or promisee. But please understand, when will we use this term promisee? Same way, when will we call A as promisor? Only when acceptance is given. Then only we are going to call it them as promisor and promisee. Okay, my dear friends, I hope all of you have followed this. So now let us continue with essential elements of a valid offer. Okay, let's continue with what? Essential elements of a valid offer, after discussing the definition of offer. Right. So what do you mean by essential elements of a valid offer? Like we had essential elements for a valid contract, same way we have got some essential elements for valid offer. Meaning, if these elements are complied with or are satisfied, then only we can say the offer is valid. And if offer is valid, that is where the acceptance given to that valid offer will result in a promise and thereby a contract, otherwise not. So it's important to understand this properly. Okay, so let's discuss one by one what are those essential elements, okay, of a valid offer. The first one is, this offer must be communicated. Must be communicated. communicated to whom? To the other party. Meaning, now in the previous example only which we have taken, where A offered to sell his car for rupees 1,25,000 to B. Okay, so now he is signifying his willingness. That means he is expressing his willingness to whom? To B. So if he wants to sell his car to B, don't you think he should inform B about it? He just says this to himself that, okay, I want to sell my car to B for rupees 1,25,000. Will that be enough? No, it can't be. Akanksha thought that I will ask Amit to look out for my Tommy Choo Choo. So do you think now if Akanksha says this to herself, okay, maybe standing in front of the mirror, will it be enough? Will it suffice? No. So please understand, if you want to give the offer to someone, you will have to communicate to that someone, right? So that's where the first thing must be communicated. What must be communicated? Obviously offer. We are discussing offer. So offer must be communicated to the other party. And why is it that it should be communicated to the other party? Because the offerer has an intention to take the acceptance from the other party. So this offer should always be given with a view. With a view to obtain what? To obtain the consent of that other party. What is that other party? Called as offeree. So whenever offer is given with a view to obtain the consent of offeree. Right? Don't just give an offer for the sake of it. When you're giving an offer, be serious about it. You should have an intention that the other party should accept my offer. That should be your intention. When A said, I am ready to sell, or I want to sell my car to you for rupees 1,25,000. What was there in his mind? It was there in his mind that yes, this person should give acceptance to it. That way the offer should be given. This is another essential element which has to be kept in mind. If you don't have this intention of taking acceptance, then it cannot be called as a valid offer. Maybe you will call it as offer, but that cannot be called as valid offer. Then very important thing, that this offer when given must not be, you can say, putting, or must not be putting a burden of acceptance. Well, sir, what does that mean? It means when the person is giving an offer, when one party is giving the offer and saying that you will have to give acceptance to it, I don't know anything, right? If I don't hear from you, that means you have accepted it. These type of things will not work. See, you should have an intention to take the acceptance, but you cannot compel acceptance. You cannot put a burden on the offeree that you have to accept it. You have no choice, because you know free consent is very important. No? So it's not possible that this person, this offerer, puts a burden on him or says, if I don't hear from you, if I don't get the answer from you, if I don't get the reply, then I'll assume that as if you have accepted. This is not correct, my dear friends. So that's where the third essential element. Then one more thing which you know, earlier we have discussed, that offer must be what? Definite. Offer must be definite. Offer must be clear. Offer must be certain. That means offer should not be vague. Offer should not be vague. Offer should be clear. Offer should be certain. Same example I'll take. Suppose I have 5 cars and I say I am giving an offer to sell my car. Okay, I propose to sell my car for rupees 5 lakhs. Now I said I have got 5 cars. So if I simply say I am proposing to sell my car for rupees 5 lakhs, question comes, which car? Out of those 5 cars, which one am I talking about? Isn't it? So that is a question which will be raised. So my dear friends, we need to understand that when we give an offer, any person, any party who is giving an offer should always be giving an offer, right, which is definite, clear, certain, no chance of any confusion, no vagueness at all. Right. Then must be capable of creating legal relations. Okay, must be capable of what? Creating legal relations. Meaning, when you're giving an offer, you should have an intention of creating legal relations. That means if I'm giving an offer, I'm giving an offer with an intention to take the acceptance from the other party. So if the party give acceptance and later do not perform the part, do not perform his obligation or her obligation, then I will sue that party in the court of law. That should be your intention. Okay, so you will, when you are giving an offer and you want to call that offer as a valid offer, please understand it is very important that you should have an intention of creating legal relations. That means your intention is to make that party bound. Okay, legally bound. Once accepted, then you are serious about it. If that party doesn't do that his part, then you will take that party to the court of law. Right? Same way, if you don't do your part, then that party will take you to the court of law. That should be the intention there. That is where we say offer must be capable of creating legal relations. Okay, offer must be capable of creating legal relations. One more we can take is must express final willingness. Offerer, okay, offerer when he is giving an offer must express what? The offer must express final willingness. Meaning what? If someone is giving an offer, it's not that he's still thinking about it. It shows his final willingness. Yes, this is final. I want to sell my car. No, I am thinking that I'll sell my car. Do you think this is final? No. So it's very important when you're giving an offer, think about it. Okay. When do you think about it? Before giving an offer. Otherwise, don't give an offer. Think about it, whether you're serious about this offer, whether you want this to happen or not. If you think, yes, I want this, then only give it. So it's very important that it should be, it should show your final willingness. Okay. So this way we have got some essential elements of valid offer. Only if these essential elements are met, then we can say the offer is valid. Right. So let me just quickly take you through again. What did I say in this? The essential elements include what? That the offer must be communicated to the other party. That's very important. The offerer cannot just speak to himself. He'll have to convey it to that other party. Which other party? To whom he wants to give the offer. Right? Other party in the sense to whom he wants to give the offer. Because again the question comes, if I want to sell the car to Naman, is it that I should give the offer to Naman or should I go and communicate with Harshal? No, if I have to give this to Naman, I should communicate directly with Naman. You may say, sir, but if let's say Harshal is Naman's agent, then okay, that's an exception. Otherwise, normally we'll say, okay, if I want to sell to Naman, then I should communicate with Naman. With a view to obtain the consent, right? With always a view to obtain the assent, consent, acceptance. This is all one and the same, assent, consent or acceptance. And I hope you are paying attention to the spellings as well. Acha, one more thing, let me tell you. See, if you commit any spelling mistakes in the examination, then maybe there is a chance that they may ignore if that spelling mistake is not changing the meaning. If that spelling mistake is not changing the meaning. But if spelling mistake changes the meaning of the sentence, then obviously they'll deduct marks. For example, suppose you had to write legal hair. You had to write legal hair in the examination. Now you might have understood what I'm going to say now. Instead of writing H-E-I-R, you have written H-A-I-R. Right? H-A-I-R. So what will happen? Maybe E replaced with A, but will change the meaning. So this spelling mistake will definitely prove to be costlier for you. That means they're going to deduct marks for it. So keep in mind that you don't commit spelling mistakes. And just in case it happened, then probably it could save you, or it can save you only if that is not changing the meaning. Okay. Yeah. So I was talking about essential elements wherein we said communicated to other party, offer must be communicated with a view to obtain the consent, right? Should not put a burden of acceptance on that offeree. He should be freely be able to decide that. The offer must be definite, clear, certain and should not be vague. The offer must be capable of creating legal relations. So it's not about social relations or agreement. We're talking about legal relations here. Then only it will be a valid offer. It should always express final willingness. So it's not that he's just thinking, or it's not that, I mean, he's still yet to decide and all. Okay, he has already decided what is that he wants to do. That's what we expect. Okay. Chalo, great. Now let us talk about important points, some important points relating to offer, and in this only we will cover even type of offers or classification of offers. Okay, when we are discussing important points, that time we will be discussing even maybe type of offers also. So let us start one by one, or we can do one more thing. If you want, we can read these essential elements from the book once, okay, just to have more confidence, and then maybe go ahead with that important points or types of offers. Okay. Yes. So let's read once from this. Now, essential elements of a valid offer. The offer must be communicated to the other party to be accepted. Thus, an offer accepted without its knowledge does not confer any legal rights. Yeah, the other party didn't get to know about the offer, then how will that party give the acceptance? It's not possible. So communication is very important. That is where the other party can give acceptance to it. Otherwise, acceptance will have no meaning. Okay. Suppose I did not give any offer to Naman, but Naman comes and says, yeah, I accept. Arey bhai, I have not given an offer only to you. Where is the question of you saying acceptance? Next, second one. The offer must be made, the offer must be made with a view to obtain the consent of the offeree. So as soon as the offeree accepts it, the offerer is bound by it, because once the acceptance is given, then it results in promise. And when there is promise on both the parties, from both the parties side, it will result in a contract. So that's why they're saying offerer is bound by it. Only when acceptance is given, then the offerer is bound by it. Example, A jokingly said that he was willing to sell his horse for rupees 2,000. B, knowing that A was not seriously making the offer, said that he has accepted the offer. In this case, A's offer is not the real offer, not a valid offer, as he did not make it with a view to obtain the consent of B. Right? Because he was just joking here. So he had no intention of taking the acceptance from B. So if B is giving that acceptance will have no validity. Okay, that because that offer itself is not a valid offer. Then an offer must not put the burden of acceptance on the offeree. Right? No burden. It should not put any burden. The offerer cannot say that if the acceptance is not communicated within a fixed period of time, the offer will be considered as accepted. Okay, if offerer says that I don't hear from you within so and so time, I'll treat that as acceptance. No, these type of things can't be written. Law doesn't recognize it. Then the offer must have its terms definite, certain and clear. Correct? So A offered to sell to B 100 tons of oil. The offer is uncertain as there is nothing to show what kind of oil is intended to be sold. Next, the offer must be capable of creating legal relationship. Example, A invited B to dinner and B accepted the invitation. It is a mere social invitation and A will not be liable if he fails to provide dinner to B. Correct? So it's important that it should be capable of creating legal relations. Next, the offer must express the final willingness of the offerer. Sometimes a party does not express his final willingness but proposes certain terms on which he is willing to negotiate. In such cases, he is not making an offer because he is not expressing his final willingness to enter into a contract. See, sometimes what? He might say that I might think if I get, let's say, rupees 5 lakhs for my house, then I might sell off that. So this is what? Again, doesn't show his final willingness. He is still thinking. He is still contemplating that, which cannot be called as final willingness. So it's important that there shall be final willingness, okay, coming from the offerer's side. Then only that offer can be called as a valid offer. Okay, guys. So Now let's talk about the next one. So till now, what did we discuss in this? We have discussed the definition of offer, which is coming from section 2 clause A. Okay, section 2 clause A. And then while discussing this definition of offer itself, we have talked about the parties also, right? Parties also, and we have taken the help of 2 clause C, because 2 clause C defines the term, right? 2 clause C defines the term promisor and promisee. So we have discussed that as well while discussing this. Then we have discussed essential elements of a valid offer. And now we are into important points or types of offer. So the first one here, please understand, offer may be made to world at large. To world at large. Meaning what? It is not necessary that every time the offer should be made to a specific person, to a specified person, to an ascertained person. Okay, it's not necessary. Meaning, you'll say, sir, what? See, in the examples which we have been taking or which we have taken, you might recall or you can recall that we always said Naman, we always said maybe Harshal, we always said maybe A wants to sell it to B. Like that, maybe we were talking about a specific person. Okay, offer is being given to a specific person. But don't you think it is possible that offer might be given generally as well? That means offer may be given to world at large also. Sir, how can that happen? Suppose you said, I want to sell my house, and you gave a newspaper advertisement for that. Okay, so you are giving an offer. You are giving an offer to the to the world at large. You rather in this case, so you are inviting offers. You are inviting offers, and that too from world at large. So please understand. I mean, sometimes you may give offer to world at large. Maybe the person said once when he lost his Tommy Choo Choo that anyone who gets that Tommy Choo Choo to me, I will pay ₹1,000 for it. So this offer is for whom? Is it for a particular person? No, it is for world at large, for maybe a group of persons, or maybe generally being given. Like we also ask some questions in the class, right? I also ask. So maybe I can say, come on now, Harshita, you have to answer this, right? That means I'm specifically asking Harshita. But if I say, class, come on, any one of you can give the answer for this. So this means what? It becomes general. Okay. So here as well, we have got what? That offer may be made to world at large. So from this itself, we get to know that there can be specific offer, there can be a general offer. See, so that is where I was telling you, while discussing important points, probably we can discuss even what? Types of offer. Okay. We can discuss what? Types of offer as well. Okay, not every time, but mostly we'll be discussing that way. Right. Then next one. This offer may be to do something or not to do something. Correct? Offer may be to do something or not to do something. That means offer may be positive or offer may be negative. Offer may be positive or offer may be negative. I said, please supply 100 units of mobile to me. Okay. I said, maybe to someone, let's say to Amit. I said, please supply 100 units of mobile to me. So is this positive offer or negative offer? Obviously, this is positive offer because I'm talking about doing something, correct? But there can be even negative offer as well. That is not to do something. For example, yes. Suppose I say, please don't file a suit against me. Please don't file a suit against me and I'll pay you ₹10 lakhs for it. So in this case, I'm giving an offer about what? Not to do something. This is about abstinence. This is about something which is negative. I'm asking the person not to do something. So that way, if you understand, there can be positive offer, there can be as well negative offer. So from this point again, you're getting to know some type of offer, isn't it? Positive, negative. I hope you have understood. Positive is about what? To do something, right? To do something. And negative is about what? Not to do something. This we have understood from the definition also, because definition also was talking about it. Next, third one. Offer may be express or offer may be implied. Offer may be express or offer may be implied. It can be either of this, okay? It's not necessary offer should be always expressed. It can be even implied. Like I was giving an example of the bus, RTC bus, which is plying on a particular route, particular road, particular street. So it implies, it's like it's giving an offer, not by way of words, but it implies by its action that, okay, anyone who wants to go on to that particular route can come in, right, can board this particular bus. So this way, it's not always that the offer will be the express offer. Offer can be even implied offer. Okay, so offer can be express, offer can be even implied. So again, type of offer also we got to know from this particular point. Okay, one more, or rather next one. Cross offer do not result in a contract. You'll say, sir, what is this cross offer do not result in a contract? What are you trying to say? See, I'm talking about a very simple thing here, which is relating to cross offer. So first understand cross offer. You'll understand this point very easily when I talk about cross offer. Okay, what is cross offer? Offer which is crossing, that's cross offer. Meaning, sir, what is that? See, sometimes there can be identical offers. There can be what? Identical offers given by two persons to each other in ignorance of each other's offer. In ignorance of each other's offer. Meaning, I'll take an example. Let us say there is one person, okay, who gives an offer to sell his house for rupees 1 crore to some other person. Okay, to some other person. So one person has given an offer to sell his house for rupees 1 crore to other person. And let's say this particular offer has been sent by him by post. Okay, this fellow has posted this offer. And when did he post? Let's say he has posted on 1st of May 2020. Now this other person, okay, let's call this person as A, who is giving the offer, and this other person to whom offer is given is B. So this other person B is not aware of this, is not having any knowledge of this. So in the ignorance, okay, or without knowledge of that offer, makes an offer. This person is also giving an offer. B is also giving an offer. What sort of offer the person B is giving? B says, I want to buy. Buy what? Your house. Okay, for rupees 1 crore. And B also has posted this offer. Okay, posted this offer. Maybe let's say on 1st of May itself. Now what will happen? If you understand, both of them are making identical offers. A says, I want to sell my house for 1 crore. B says, I want to buy your house for 1 crore. Okay, and these particular offers are being made without having the knowledge of each other's offer. A doesn't know about offer of B. B doesn't know offer of A. So without having the knowledge of each other's offer, they are making an offer to each other, which is called as cross offer, because now the offer will cross each other during post. Understand? So this cross offer do not result, okay, please understand, do not result in a contract. Reason? See, for a contract, what do we need? For a contract, we need offer and we need acceptance. But here what is happening is, there is an offer and also offer only. There is an offer and offer, which cannot result in a contract. Understand, guys? So cross offer do not result in a contract. So while discussing the types of offer, we can say, again we can talk about cross offer. right? Cross offer is also one of the types of offer which do not result in a contract. Clear, guys? What is a cross offer? Can you just repeat once? It's nothing but identical offer given by both the parties. Okay, the offer given by both the parties, identical offer given by both the parties without having knowledge of each other's offer. Okay, yes. Then next one or another one we would like to take up. A mere statement of intention. Mere statement of intention is not an offer. Sir, what? Mere statement of intention. If you just intend to do something without having, what do you say, an intention of taking the acceptance, that is not an offer. See, when I'm giving an offer, we said the person should express willingness to do or not to do something with a view to take the assent from the other party for the act or abstinence, isn't it? So if some person is just intending something, right, is just intending something, that cannot be called as what? That cannot be called as what? Offer. If I say, I think, or according to me, the house is like worth 50 crores. My house is worth 50 crores. I think that if someone gives me 50 crores, probably I'll sell my house. Again, these are what? These are just statement of intention, okay, which cannot be called as offer. Which cannot be called as offer. Understand, guys? When you make an offer, make properly that offer with a view to take the assent from other party, and that should show, as we said earlier, only final willingness, right? So this point is actually a continuation of the essential elements which we have discussed when we said express final willingness, right, in these essential elements. So this is connected to that particular point, okay, continuation of that. Now next one, very important thing which I'm going to discuss is invitation to offer. Okay, invitation to offer differs from offer. Differs from offer. You say, sir, what does this mean? So you need to understand first what is invitation to offer, and then you'll have to understand what is offer. Okay, so let me explain what is invitation to offer, and then offer, and also acceptance. You will understand it. Person gave an ad or advertisement in the newspaper. For what? Anything you can say. Let's say for selling his house. To sell his house. This person A gave this newspaper advertisement that he wants to sell his house. Now, person B comes and says, I am willing. Okay, this person B comes and says, I am willing to buy your house. I am willing to buy your house. Now, don't you think after this, A should agree? Yes, A should agree to it. Okay, yes, I will sell my house to you. Correct? Should happen or not? Yes. So now please understand this willingness of B to buy the house after seeing that newspaper advertisement is nothing but offer. This is not acceptance, my dear friends. Please understand, this is offer. And when A agrees to this, this is nothing but acceptance. This is nothing but what? Acceptance. Now you might say, sir, then what is this newspaper advertisement? This is invitation to offer. This is invitation to offer. Okay. This newspaper advertisement was given to invite offers from others. Right? This was to receive offers from others. Let's see who gives an offer and who gives the best offer. Then I will decide. Then I will sell. Okay, so this can't be called as offer. This is only invitation to offer. But when B comes forward and says, I would like to buy, or C comes forward and also says, I would like to buy, that means they are giving an offer. And after that, again, A has to decide which one he would like to accept, which one he would like to agree upon. So that will be called as acceptance. Okay, my dear friends. Sir, one more example, sir. Yes, sir. Why not? We will take. Don't worry. So I am taking another example of prospectus of a company. Okay, prospectus of a company. All of you have heard of prospectus of a company? Prospectus, which is given by the company when they want to issue securities like shares, debentures, when they want to issue to the public, they issue some document called as prospectus. In that, they'll write some vital information of the company, right? It will contain vital information of the company so that the investor can read that, can know about the company, and then can take a decision whether to invest in that company or not, whether to buy the securities in the company or not, right? So prospectus is a document by way of which the investors can know about the company and then can take a decision whether to invest in that company or not, correct? Okay, so there is prospectus. And then there is something called as application form. And then there is nothing but allotment, right? There's something called as allotment. These three. Prospectus given, person reads that prospectus, the investor reads that prospectus, and then comes and takes the application form, fill it up and gives to the company. He gives that filled up application form to the company, and then company verifies that application form and decides to allots that security, correct? So now when he comes and gives this application form, okay, fill up this application form and give it to the company, what is that particular investor doing? If you understand, he is giving an offer. He's saying, I am ready to buy the security. And when company is allotting the security, please understand, when company is allotting the security, it is nothing but acceptance. It's left to the company now to decide whether to allot or not. That means to accept or not. Then you will say, sir, what is this prospectus then? This prospectus is nothing but invitation to offer. Okay, invitation to offer. Understand, guys? So what we are trying to say is invitation to offer and offer doesn't result in a contract. When there is invitation to offer and there is an offer, you cannot say there is a contract. But when we say there is an offer and there is acceptance, can it result in a contract? Yes, because it will result in promise and thereby it can result in what? Contract. Obviously, assuming all the other essential elements are satisfied. Okay. Sir, one more example, sir, for this. Okay, one more I'll give. Maybe let's take the example of supermarket or a showroom where goods are on display. Goods are displayed. So goods, let's say, are on display with some price tag. Isn't it? When you go to the supermarket, you find number of things there. Same way when you go to a showroom, maybe number of things are displayed in the showcase or maybe in the almara with some price tag. And then what you do is pick them and put it in the trolley. Okay, pick them and put it in the trolley and then offer at the cash counter. Offer them at the cash counter. You go to the cash counter with the trolley and give it to them. And then what happens? The person bills it. At the billing counter. That person bills that particular goods which you have picked. Okay, right? So now, my dear friends, please tell me now, what is this? When the person has picked, that is, you have picked and put it in the trolley and go to the cash counter, what is this called as? This is nothing but offer. You have offered that I would like to buy this. And when the person has billed it, has collected the cash and billed it, that means the person has given acceptance. Has given the acceptance. This again, if you understand example of those implied offer, implied contract we are talking about, no? So it's like that. The person has picked it, okay, and given it to the counter. That means he has implied, he is giving that implied offer, and that other person is what? Billing it. So that means acceptance is being given. Now you might say, sir, what is this? And obviously you know the answer. It is nothing but invitation to offer. It's nothing but invitation to offer. So please understand, my dear friends, invitation to offer does not result in a contract. Invitation to offer should be supported by offer as well as later on acceptance. Then only we can say the contract can come into place. Then only we can say the contract can come into place. Followed? Yeah, so we were into what? Yeah, we were into important points or types of offer. We have discussed 6. One more I'll talk about. Yeah, one more is, yeah, answer to a question. Answer to a question doesn't result in offer. Please understand. Meaning, now someone asked me, what is the cost of your car? What do you think is the value of your car? And I said rupees 10 lakhs. Does it mean now that I want to sell my car for rupees 10 lakh? Does it mean that I have given an offer to sell my car for rupees 10 lakhs? No. So please understand, answer to a question cannot be called as an offer. Okay, cannot be called as an offer, cannot be constituted as an offer. Followed? Good. So simply answering some question cannot be called as an offer. Okay, sir. Acha, one more thing. Counter offer. Okay. So, sir, what is this counter offer? Okay, I'll explain. I'll help you understand. With an example only directly, I'll explain you. Let us say there is this person A, okay, who is giving an offer to sell his mobile. Let's say he wants to sell his mobile at rupees 10,000. To whom? To some person B. Okay. No, sir, please don't use the name AB. Okay, you can take any name. If you want, you can say Shruti wants to sell her mobile. Let's say to whom? Any name again you can take. Let's say Harsha. So now Harsha says, I am interested in buying your mobile. Okay. I am interested. She says, I will buy your mobile, but I will buy for rupees 8,000. Okay. So if you understand, this particular statement which was given by A, that is in our example we said Shruti, is nothing but offer. Okay, A has offered, that is in our example we said Shruti has offered to sell her mobile for rupees 10,000 to Harsha, that is B, and Harsha, that is B, has said that I would buy. After knowing this, that means she has the knowledge of this offer. She said after having the knowledge of this offer, she said that I will buy your mobile, but for how much? Rupees 8,000. So this is nothing but counter offer. So what is counter offer? If you understand, counter offer is nothing but conditional acceptance. Right? She is accepting, but she has put some condition here. So conditional acceptance is not a valid acceptance. It will result in what? Counter offer. Because now it is like A has to decide, that is Shruti has to decide whether she should sell that mobile for 8,000 or not. So it's like what? Another offer which has come. So this cannot be called as acceptance. This is only a counter offer. Okay, so counter offer doesn't result again or doesn't amount to valid acceptance. Okay, and thereby doesn't result in a contract. Achha, few people uses this term qualified acceptance also. Huh? What is counter offer? Qualified acceptance. Qualified acceptance means nothing but conditional acceptance, and that itself is counter offer. Okay, guys, I hope you have followed. Yes or no? Right. So ready to buy at ready to buy, but only at 10,000, not ready to buy at 8,000, not at 10,000, isn't it? So That's where counter offer has come. And now the last one here, which is standing offer. Standing offer, or maybe we can say open offer, meaning nothing but continuing offer. Let's say I go to an interview, I give an interview and I say I propose myself to be an employee of this company, I offer my services to this particular company. They say we don't need your services as of now. So I say no problem, anytime later also if you need your services you can call me. Okay, or you may say, sir, you're a chartered accountant, you're a consultant, right? So maybe you go and give some offer to a company or to a business entity, wherein you say that you can offer some services relating to company law, right, relating to some business laws, and they say as of now we don't need it. So I say no problem, whenever you need you can call me. So that means it's nothing but what? An open offer given, right? Whenever they want they can come. No sir, let's say you say that only within 1 year you need to give acceptance. Yeah, so it is open till what? 1 year. So even if I put some restriction of this sort, okay, restriction in the sense some time limit, right? Next 1 year you may call me. So till 1 year it is nothing but open. It's nothing but the offer which is standing. Okay, don't say now sleep. What is sleeping offer or what is sitting offer? Huh? So it's a standing. It's a continuing offer. Understand? So this is with respect to what? The important points and even types of offer. Okay, let me just take you through again and then we can read it from the book as well. We said offer can be specific or general. That means offer can be made to world at large also. Offer may be positive, offer may be negative. We said offer may be express, offer may be implied also. Then we said cross offer do not result in a contract. What is cross offer? The offer which crosses each other. That means there's identical offer which is crossing each other. So that means parties have given identical offers to each other without having the knowledge of each other's offer. A doesn't know about the offer of B, B doesn't know offer of A, and that's an identical offer which they're offering. Correct? Then mere statement of intention is not going to result in offer. Just you have an intention is not enough. That one more thing, that intention you should communicate, and when you communicate, we communicate with the view to take acceptance. Correct? So only having intention is not enough. Communicating also is enough, important, not enough, sorry, is also important, plus with a view to take acceptance. And then as we said, invitation to offer is different from offer. Invitation to offer is only to receive offers. So after you receive offer, you will have to decide whether to accept them or not. So I've taken some example of newspaper advertisement or maybe prospectus or maybe supermarket or showroom. That's nothing but invitation to offer. Then we said answer to a question is not an offer. Simply when you answer a question, that doesn't mean you have given an offer. Next, counter offer. Counter offer is nothing but what? Qualified acceptance, conditional acceptance, correct? So when the person is saying that I'll accept your offer, but I'm changing this thing or I want this to be changed, that means that person itself has given a new offer now. So that will be called as a counter offer, and counter offer is not actually a valid acceptance. Then we said there can be open offer, which can also be called a standing offer. That means it's a continuing offer, right? It's a continuing offer. Maybe if you want, you can put some restriction as to up to this time only you can accept that particular offer. That can be done, but otherwise it is, we understand, nothing but going to be or can be accepted till the time they want. Okay guys, so now we have covered what? If you just come to the outline, we have covered the definition. We have covered the definition of offer, right guys? We have seen essential elements of a valid offer. We have seen even the important points of offer, and along with that important points only, we were trying to cover even kinds of offer. So what is left in offer is lapse of offer, right? Lapse of offer, which comes from section number 6. So this is something which is left, and obviously acceptance we have not touched at all, but I was just trying to see, relating to offer we have certain things, relating to acceptance we have certain things, and then section 3, 4, 5, which is communication, completion of communication. So if we say this particular topic 2 we are grouping into 3 parts. first part is what we are actually seeing. In that first part, still something is left, and what is that something left? It's nothing but lapse of offer. Okay, so yeah, obviously we need to read as well from the book, but then I guess yeah, time up. So maybe in our next session what we'll do is do a quick recap of what we have discussed today. We'll revise that first, and after that maybe I'll read it from the book as well. Okay, I'll read from the book as well, and then we'll continue. Okay, so till then, God bless you all. Thank you so much. Take care of yourself. Okay, God bless you. Bye bye.